Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we are starting something really fun and really my first series ever on this channel, and we will be discussing multiple NHL teams throughout these videos. And today we are discussing, of course, the New York Rangers, but I'll be breaking down multiple teams, really everything there is to know about them, their current roster, their prospect pool, and why everything goes in line as to them having some of the brightest futures in all of the NHL. So today, again, we are discussing the New York Rangers along with myself and Stat Boy Steven, who you've seen on the channel previously if you're a subscriber. But if you are new here, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you end up enjoying this kind of hockey content, and stay until the end of this video for all the deets and all the information. This is going to be a ton of fun, breaking down everything there is to know about the Rangers right now between their roster, prospect pool, and again, bringing it all together to really figure out why are they so coveted, not just now, but for years to come. All right, Steven, thank you so much again for being on the channel. It means a lot. So let's talk about this New York Rangers team and really why are they so coveted for being one of the brightest futures in the entire NHL. What are your thoughts just from that broad sense of things, how they rack up with a lot of the other teams in the NHL with what their future holds?
A couple of years ago, the Rangers went 4 years without a first-round pick, and this was between 2013 and 2016. They had 4 consecutive drafts without a first-rounder, and this was when they were competing. They made it to the conference final twice. They made it to the Stanley Cup final in 2014. Their prospect pool was barren because they kept trading away their assets: Anthony Duclair, Alexis, first-round picks. Because they were in contention. They were trying to win it all. And the last 4 years, they really made up everything that they lost over those first 4 years. Now they've had 8 first-round picks in the last 4 drafts, with 3 in 2018, of course. And of course, it helps that you win 2 lotteries in a row and draft first and second overall in the last 2 drafts. But the Rangers have done really well also outside of those top picks with K-Andre Miller, Nils Lundqvist, Filip, Braden Schneider this year, who's probably closer than some people think in terms of making the team. And of course, signing free agents Panarin, trading for Trouba, Zibanejad taking that next step, Shesterkin coming over and for all we know now, for what he has shown, he is the real deal. Getting Adam Fox for 2 second-round picks. It's been an amazing turnaround in the last 3-4 years. And yeah, I understand why people are excited about this organization.
Yeah, exactly. And we really never expected the Rangers to be in the position that they are in now. At least that was the indication when Jeff Gordon first came out with the letter back a couple years ago in 2017, if my memory serves me correct, with the Rangers obviously selling off something that they really weren't known for doing for the majority of getting into the 2010s and beyond. They were competing every single year, just trying to make sure that they were in a win now stage, buying high, whether it's a trade deadline or free agency. But then they really started to commit to this rebuild, which some people argue it's more of a retool because of how, say, fast pace is going. Others say that it is a rebuild and luck has come into things. I think it's definitely a balance of a lot of those factors. But when you look at obviously shopping off, whether it's Ryan McDonough, Rick Nash, JT Miller in the McDonough deal, Matt Zuccarello, the list goes on and on with all these Rangers that have been dealt. Really, this core group of what we have all fell in love with over this past decade is now gone, and Henrik Lundqvist being bought out now. Jesper Fast leaving in free agency, among all the other players in between that I didn't touch on specifically. But nonetheless, the Rangers are in a spot now where there aren't a lot of teams in the NHL. I'd say there's a select few, and I will be touching on the others in other videos for the series, that don't just have a great looking roster as it is right now, but their prospect pool is just oozing with talent to the point where over these next 5 to even 10 years, this Rangers team cannot just be highly competitive, but it really could be the point where their ceiling is so high that it's something that's been unprecedented. We haven't seen this before. At least I know I haven't as a Rangers fan. I'm only 20 years old, so I know there's a different story for people that were there for the 94 run, among other things. But this Rangers team, to say I'm ecstatic is definitely an understatement when you just look at everything on paper currently. it's awesome. And knowing that it's still just the beginning, they're still in a rebuild stage. They're not going all in just yet. And I think a lot of Ranger fans get that confused at times as to why aren't they, say, buying high in this year's free agency, among other things. But their prospect pool is just phenomenal. And now let's just take a look at currently how this roster is looking, right? Because if we look at, and I'll pull it up for us in 1 second right now. Again, if you currently look at how this Rangers lineup is looking, and this is all hypothetical at this point, you can go to dailyfaceoff.com. They show you basically the lines for each team in the NHL currently. And from all the moves that the Rangers have had, we still have a first line as of now of Kreider, Zibanejad, Buchnevich. Kreider coming off of a 45-point season, pretty consistent with what you can expect from him. Kreider is one of the longest-term Rangers currently on the roster now, given everyone else that has departed through either free agency, buyouts, or trades. But he has been a rock for the Rangers for really these past 5+ years now, and I've loved every second of his play, and them landing him on the extension, even with that depth in the left side now, is still going to bode them well going into playoffs sooner rather than later. Then we have Mika coming off another fantastic year for the Rangers, had a career high season with 75 points and not even 60 games. Remarkable. Led the entire NHL this past year in goals per game percentage wise with 41. And then Pavel Buchnevich had a strong season for the Rangers as well, was pretty snake bitten but had 46 points. Then you get on to the second line, and Fast isn't there any longer, so we have Kakko, the former second overall pick just from a year ago, Ryan Strome, the coveted RFA, who's now really in a tough spot for the Rangers. What is going to happen with him? We may touch on that in the video going forward. He had 59 points, a career high last year, playing alongside Artemi Panarin, who I think we can all agree is probably the best free agent signing the Rangers have ever had in their history, or at least sure close to it, given how amazing he performed in his debut season with 95 points. And Kakko, yes, he didn't have a great rookie season by any means, but he really showed strides as the Rangers picked up throughout the year, and especially in the qualifying round when he had time to rest with 23 points. Then we got into the third line, and this is probably the most interesting one, is Alexis Lafreniere, Filip, Julien Gauthier. If that is how things stand once game one, opening night for the Rangers happens, I'm going to be ecstatic. I think Lafreniere has a strong chance to crack that top 6. However, if he really does prove himself in camp, but Lafreniere, just the first overall pick, we all know this. The future is so bright for him and really could be the next big thing for the Rangers, something that they really never had from a first overall selection in their history. Filip coming off a strong season of developing. This is really going to be a huge year for him. He had 23 points, and he's still so young. He's in his early 20s still. Julien Gauthier had a strong season, had only 3 points in 17 games, but nonetheless, he looks like he may have a very promising future for the Rangers, and this is another prove-it year for him as well if he can be a crucial part of the Rangers core group. And then we get to the others in Philip DiGiuseppe, Brett Howden, Brendan Lemieux. DiGiuseppe only had a couple points, we know this, but they just re-signed him on a 1-year deal at around $700K or so. Brett Howden, along in that Ryan McDonough trade a couple years ago, has been somewhat controversial, but he has been useful to David Quinn especially, and in that bottom 6 and on the penalty kill. He had a couple points this year as well. He had 19 points, and Brendan Lemieux, who is sure to re-sign with the Rangers any day now. It seems maybe it'll be after this video. Who knows? He's an RFA as well. Lemieux had a strong season with the Rangers. Nothing crazy, just 18 points, but he has a promising future. And then this blue line, Ryan Lindgren, Adam Fox. Such a fun duo for these two rookies that stepped up big. Adam Fox had just over 40 points, and Ryan Lindgren had a solid 14 points. Then you get a Brendan Smith. We don't know what the future holds for him. And a New York Rangers sweater, he only had 8 points. Jacob Trouba coming in from the Winnipeg Jets, obviously, and he had 27 points last year. And then Tony Deangelo, who just signed a recent extension with the Rangers at 2 years at 4.8 mil AAV. And Deangelo had a great season, 53 points, career high for him. And they have him paired with Jack Johnson. And then if we get further down, we have Shesterkin and Alexander Georgiev. So initial thoughts, Steven, on this roster, how it shapes up currently. That is not including any trades that maybe or more than likely going to happen in the coming weeks.
Yeah, the lines are probably not what we're going to see throughout the season. I mean, it sounds more like they listed it based on depth per position and not necessarily line combinations. Because that third line, as exciting as it sounds, when your average age is 20.
Exactly. I was going to touch on that.
I'm not sure if that's going to work at the NHL, but I could see Kreider being the experienced guy on that third line, and Lafreniere playing with Zibanejad and Buchnevich. And I wouldn't be surprised if they sign a veteran for the fourth line. A lot of Ranger fans are excited about Morgan Barron and Vitaly Kravtsov, but there are things that might prohibit the Rangers from playing them. Mostly their performance bonuses, because as I explained on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, the performance bonuses work in a way that you need to have the cap space for the potential performance bonuses, even if the players don't hit it. 7.5% of the total cap you can go over, so that doesn't count. But the Rangers with Lafreniere, Kakko, and Shesterkin accounting for at least 9.2 million, and then Fox and Chytil and Howden also having their performance bonuses. I think Ryan Lindgren has 350K. That all adds up. And if you are already over that limit, it means that Kravtsov and Barron, if you call them up, they count towards the cap for, I think, 1.7 million and not 9.25K, as you usually see with players on entry-level contracts. So that might prohibit the Rangers from calling them up early. Later on, of course, that can change, because as you generate cap space on a daily basis, you bank it, and it's a complicated calculation. I won't go into it in detail right now, but
I do just want to add that regarding Kravtsov, I believe from what I've read, and I think Vince McCurgliano touched on this because I was listening to his podcast recently. He's one of the main beat writers for the Rangers, if you guys don't know. But when it comes to Kravtsov, for instance, if he is called up during the year, he will be making around 1.8 mil, if my memory serves me correct, given the performance bonuses that he has in place. So those things really factor in as well for the Rangers, as you're touching on regarding some of these more coveted prospects, as to why we may not see them in the lineup much at all next season.
Yeah, they count towards the cap for 1.7 or 1.8 million. So we might not see them early on, but later on you could. But this could also be a reason why the Rangers would go for a guy like Justin Richards or Patrick Kodorenko instead of Morgan Barron for cap reasons, because those are two players they signed as undrafted free agents back in March and April, and they don't have any performance bonuses in their contract. So it makes it easier to fit those players on the team if there are injuries or if they need a call up for other reasons. But yeah, it's an exciting time to be a Ranger fan. Lafreniere jumping into the team straight away as a first overall pick, and what you alluded to early on. Yeah, this doesn't really feel like a normal rebuild, and yeah, you needed a little bit of luck with the draft lotteries. But to be fair, the Chicago Blackhawks had 2 picks in the top 3 in 2006 and 2007. The Penguins, everyone always talks about Malkin and Crosby, but they actually had a top 3 pick 4 years in a row, because they also had Marc-Andre Fleury in 2003.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
And then Jordan Staal in 2006. And I think in 2002, they had a player, Ryan Whitney, 4th overall. So they drafted top 5 years in a row.
Yeah.
And even if Jordan Staal didn't really become that superstar in Pittsburgh, they still got good use out of him. And
those players really obviously helped round out their core.
So, and they traded him to Carolina. They got some nice assets for him. It really helps when you have those high draft picks. And the Rangers, until they won 2 lotteries in a row, they picked relatively high with 7th overall and 9th overall, but it wasn't really those positions where you get that surefire star. So winning the draft lottery certainly helped, because without winning those draft lotteries, the Rangers would probably end up with Trevor Zegras in 2019 and maybe a guy like Marco Rossi or Anton Lundell this year, which is not bad, but it's nowhere close to getting Kakko and Lafreniere. So it definitely helps the Rangers during this rebuild, but it's just everything coming together. Panarin being a free agent, which is probably the best free agent in the last 2 decades when you consider how good he is and how young he is.
And just the immediate impacts he had on the roster. Like, I don't think a lot of people seem to realize just how pivotal Panarin was to the Rangers' success this past season. Him on the ice versus off the ice, if you break it down analytically speaking, there was a huge gap. And say goals for while he's present and goals for when he's not. And against like Panarin, even though he doesn't have a flashy defensive game, he is far above average in that category, which is huge for the type player that he is. So he does so much in not just the offensive zone, but two-way for the Rangers, whether it's between, his stick lifts. I absolutely love seeing that leads to a breakaway or a 2-on-1, or just everything regarding his game has truly been impactful, and his personality is great. He's a guy that even though he doesn't speak necessarily too fluent English, it really seems like he makes an impact on this roster, not just on the ice, but in the locker room with a kind of, jovial, jolly kind of vibe that he gives off on a night-to-night basis. He's really done it all for this Rangers team in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and I think the Jacob Trouba trade is very underrated by Ranger fans. Of course, he didn't have a great season to start, but you have to get used to a new system, new coaching staff, new defensive scheme, living in a new city. And for some players, it could take a couple of months to get used to that. But I think the big change for Trouba will come from not playing with Brady Shea. And I know Brady Shea and Jacob Trouba are friends, and they played together at a younger age, but they really didn't play well together because they didn't really complement each other. They didn't really fill the hole in each other's games. They were kind of the same player. They were kind of the same player. They were puck moving defensemen, and if you look at Adam Fox with Ryan Lindgren, that's a perfect combination because you have Adam Fox who's a puck moving defenseman who's great at the transition game, and I have Ryan Lindgren, who's more of the aggressive, stay-at-home guy, and you need a little bit of both on a pairing. And the Shea Trouba pairing never had that balance. So we'll have to wait and see who Jacob Trouba will be paired with. Maybe they pair him with Brendan Smith, because honestly, that was a pretty good pairing late in the season. I know Brendan Smith is not who Rangers want to see, but neither is Jack Johnson. Both are only on the books for 1 year.
I'll take Smith any day of the week if I had to pick between the two.
Of course, but the Rangers signed Jack Johnson as sort of an insurance if their prospects don't pan out.
He's just a filler, and while it may be frustrating, given the other players that you can make the argument were available, the Rangers, Martin wanted him, he recommended him, JD had that connection too. It is one of those things where maybe that isn't the best thing to happen, where you have, say, your guys in the coaching staff or management that are pulling for a player more so because they care about their character, more so than, say, what the actual, eye test and analytical test will show you. But again, it's a 1-year deal, $1 million. I think the Rangers fans, and myself included, we can bite the bullet here. And hoping at least he doesn't get top 4 minutes.
Yeah, and it's a 1-year deal, like you said. We had players in the past who were here for 1 year.
Plenty.
Adam Dennick was here for 1 year. Adam McQuaid was here for less than a year. We traded him at the deadline.
Yeah, McQuaid was a signing I never understood for the Rangers as soon as that happened.
They traded, I think, a 4th-round pick for him, and then at the deadline, they traded him to Columbus for a 4th-round pick.
And it was a lower 4th-round pick.
Yeah, but they didn't lose anything. They got
I agree.
An experienced defenseman for a couple of months, and it only cost them, I think, 10 spots in the draft in the 3rd round. So it was an okay deal. But they signed Freddie Claesson. In the past, they had guys like Jeff Wojciechowski and Matt Hunwick. Those guys were never here for the long haul. Those guys were just here short term, just like Anton Strome was here for a short term at first, and until everything worked out, and he eventually ended up playing with the Rangers for, I think, 3 years before moving on to Tampa.
And Stroman's always going to be one of my favorite, more underappreciated players the Rangers have had over this past decade. I think losing him, not re-signing him, had a significant effect on that Rangers lineup when you look at the defense in the years going forward in their playoff runs.
Yeah, and the Rangers getting Jack Johnson for 1 year, I think makes perfect sense for me, because they can ease in the prospects, whether that's Matthew Robertson or Keandre Miller or Tarmo Reunanen. We simply don't know who's going to make the team on the left side. But if one of them does, they can just trade Jack Johnson at the deadline, get a 2nd-round pick for him, or a 3rd-round pick, whatever a team thinks he's worth. And it's just insurance short term, and this is also the reason why the Rangers did not want to sign Jesper Fast because in that same vein, signing Jesper Fast for more than 2 years would make it a lot harder to open up a spot for a guy like Vitaly Kravtsov down the line, or because you have Buchnevich, Kakko, Gauthier already. If you want Kravtsov in the lineup as well, someone has to go. And the Rangers just didn't want to commit for 3 years, and Jesper Fast decided to sign in Carolina for 3 years. Good for him. He got the money he wanted as a free agent. I will never criticize a player for taking the deal that benefits him the most. Just like I never criticized Chris Drury for signing with the Rangers. If a general manager comes up to you and offers you, what was it, 5 million for 4 years, 5 million a year, basically 20 million. Even if my knees are shot, I'm going to sign that contract. Give me that money. I don't care.
Yeah, no, that's always been the broken record, really, up until these past couple of years when the rebuild started for the Rangers, where you'd have these veteran guys in the NHL who, regardless of how proven they were, even the likes of the great one, Gretzky himself, they would still know that they could come to New York to get that last payday, and for their side of things, especially a lot of the times, hoping that they can kind of rekindle some of that magic that they've had more in the prime of their career, when more often than not, it was not worth it on the value end of things after, say, a season.
Yeah, and the same thing was true for Dan Boyle. I think he was planning on retiring in 2014,
yep. Mm-hmm.
And then Glenn Sader threw 9 million at him over 2 years. I mean, I don't blame a 38-year-old guy for signing a contract, giving him 9 million. Never hate the player, hate the general manager for a bad contract.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. And the same thing can be said with Shattenkirk and that whole situation as of late as well. But if we look at when this what's happening with this Rangers roster now, we know so much potential with them, and I think we can all agree again that while the Rangers' main focus is not to be a Stanley Cup contender next season, it is another development year, and it would kind of seem silly to suggest that the Rangers will not make playoffs. Now, I know the Metro is difficult. It is not getting any easier, especially with the likes of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now the Buffalo Sabres, even though they're in the Atlantic, but I'm just staying on the topic of a wild card race, for instance, and Florida Panthers, a lot of teams are really going to be pushing for these playoff spots better and better each year coming on that Eastern Conference. So the Rangers do have a tough task, but between Alexis Lafreniere in his rookie year, possibly playing alongside Kaapo Kakko, we're on the verge of seeing a duo, possibly, for the next 5+ years that can be absolutely dominant for the Rangers if all things go good. And then if you look at what is going to happen with them, not just now, we know that Mika Zibanejad has 1 year left on his deal, as do some other players. We have some key players in this Rangers organization that do need to be kept long-term or they're going to be dealt. But what makes them one of the brightest futures, not just with how the roster is on paper, but as we touched on previously with some of them, their prospect pool is just, it's up there. It's been really how much they have flipped things around. As you said, the Rangers went from being one of the bottom feeders in the entire NHL for quite some time when it came to their prospects and their development to completely turning the page in ways that I couldn't even imagine. Yes, it did help for the Rangers to luck out and gain Kaapo Kakko and Alexis Lafreniere, given those lottery selections. No question. Rangers, we're not going to complain about that happening, obviously. But what they have done outside of that has really been strong in his own right, and I believe it should get the credit it deserves. Yes, there's always going to be that blemish, if you will, with Elias Anderson, with things not going good there, really looking like he would be the start of possibly a bright future for the Rangers with drafting young guys in this first round. But outside of that, we have Chytil, obviously, who I'm a huge fan of Chytil. I'm really excited for him. You have Vitaly Kravtsov just from a couple years ago, who it's easy to forget about guys like him, given everything that's happening with the Rangers right now. But Kravtsov has such a bright future. He looks like he could very well be a top 6 winner for the Rangers in the years to come. And a very impressive one that has great playmaking ability and was really rounding out his game this year to start the KHL season before he dealt with his injury. He's still injured as of now, I do believe. And then if you look at other guys, whether it's Niels Lundqvist, who will probably be with the Rangers in a year, at least in North America, whether he's with the Rangers or in Hartford, who knows? But he is a huge prospect for the Rangers, as we all know. He's going to be an absolute stud. I was really excited when the Rangers first drafted him in the first round a couple of years ago, because just from all the highlights and the clips that I've seen of him from the eye test, and I haven't breaking down analytics yet because I wasn't really browsing prospects gain into great detail as I am now, but he looked very impressive, and he has done nothing but progress for the Rangers. And then if you look at other guys, Keandre Miller, we know the story there. Really, he's only been a defenseman for 4 years now? It's absolutely insane what he has done in this short period of time in his young hockey career. He looks like he could be that bona fide two-way defenseman for the Rangers on the left side that has size, that can really know how to stay in his own end, but can really take out the puck. He's so fast for his size as well. I love that about his game. And then if you look at all the other Rangers that the players the Rangers have drafted, whether it's Carl Henriksen that we've touched on before being drafted. Henriksen, was he a second or third round pick?
Second round pick.
Okay, yeah, he was a second round pick. And you have plenty of other guys for the Rangers as well. If you look at the defense, Zach Jones, who I know that you interviewed not long ago, and I've been a huge fan of Zach Jones. I'm ecstatic to see what he can do.
Look, I was at the draft last year in Vancouver, and Zach Jones was probably my favorite pick of the draft, and that's saying a lot because I've been following Kakko ever since 2017. I followed him for almost 2 years by the time we drafted him, but Zach Jones was the pick that I really liked because I didn't expect to get him in the third round. Same with this year. My favorite pick this year for the Rangers is Brett Berard in the 5th round.
A lot of people like that pick. I do too.
Yeah, because for me, he was going to be a late second, early third rounder, and for him to still sit there in the 5th round, and the Rangers to actually identify that, and first getting Evan Vierling from the Barrie Colts, and then Brett Berard. I mean, that's just great value in the 5th round with 2 picks. They even traded 2 7th-round picks with the Sharks to trade back into the 5th round to get him. So the Rangers really identified that, which makes me really happy that they identified the player that I was excited about, same as they did last year with Zach Jones. But yeah, the Rangers have a great prospect pool. And what's important for the Rangers, what they did this year, and I touched on that a couple of days ago as well, they drafted Dylan Garand, the goalie from where does he play? The Kamloops Blazers in the WHL.
And he's gonna be with the juniors team for Canada.
So I'll quickly touch on that before I go on talking about Garand a little bit more. But there is a solid chance the Rangers have 4 players on Canada's World Junior team this year. If Lafreniere goes, and then there's also Matthew Robertson, Braden Schneider, and Dylan Garand. Those 3 are pretty much locks for the World Junior team for Canada. If Lafreniere goes, that's 4. The Rangers never had more. They had 3 Canadians at the World Juniors once. That was in 2007, when they had Mark Stahl, Marc-Andre Clichy, and Tom Pyatt. Other than that, they never had more than 2. And this year they might have 4. So it's such a weird situation for the Rangers that Ranger fans will be looking at Canada at the World Juniors and actually have players to root for. The only other player in the last 13 years, the only other Rangers draft pick to play for Canada was Anthony Duclair in 2013.
I fell in love with Duclair as soon as he had the potential to make the Rangers roster all those years ago. I know that relationship probably will not reunite, but it's just a fun thought given that he is still a free agent and he is representing himself, which is something very rare. Not many players do that in the NHL.
Yeah, true. Anyway, quickly back to Garand. The Rangers drafted a goalie in the 4th round, and Ranger fans were a little bit upset by it because do we need another goalie? But you have Adam Huska and Tyler Wall under contract now. They're both 23. In 4 years, they reach age 27, which means they're unrestricted free agents. The Rangers have to do something by that time to get value.
It doesn't hurt to have too many goaltenders because at the end of the day, it takes so long to develop. And with the tandem the Rangers currently have, you shouldn't expect either one of those to be up anytime soon. The exception I think you could give Wall if the Rangers don't commit to Georgiev long-term, say via trade, for instance.
Yeah, Georgiev is signed for 2 years now, so he'll probably be gone in a year and a half. then Tyler Wall or Adam Huska will move up to be the backup in the NHL, and then Dylan Garand can just join the Hartford Wolfpack in 2 years. So the timeline fits for the Rangers, and we still have Olof Lindbom in Sweden. The Rangers have a little bit more time with Lindbom, of course, because they give European players you have 4 years.
He was drafted in the second round 2 years ago, correct?
Yes. So in 2022, the Rangers have two goalies with their rights expiring, Dylan Garand and Olof Lindbom. They might even sign both. But this is what the Rangers have been doing over the years. And I mean, in 2014, the Rangers drafted a goalie in the fourth round, and people were complaining about that because they already had one in the second round, Brendan Halverson. But the goalie they drafted in the fourth round that year was Igor Shesterkin. So you never know.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to touch on too, because we are in this topic of prospects, I really would like to mention all of them. And when we look at the defense, you don't just have Zach Jones, who had a great year in his first year in the NCAA this past season playing for UMass. Really, one could argue even had a better year than Keandre Miller, who we all have believed up until this point that Keandre Miller was ahead of Jones. But there are good arguments to suggest that maybe it's one or the other. But I know that Jones had, I believe, 23 points in his debut season and with UMass this past year. So he's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to Matthew Robertson. We've touched on him on the past regarding the Rangers. Steal pick for the Rangers in the second round just a year ago. Already signed his ELC. That's something to watch as well. He could be with the club in a couple of years, which won't surprise me given the lack of really depth the Rangers currently have on that left side when it's talking about actual roster players currently. And then if you look at other guys, whether it's Braden Schneider, who we touched on in the previous Ranger video as well, he looks like he can very well have the potential to be a top 4 defenseman for the Rangers in the future. When will that happen? I'm not sure, but there is reason to suggest that maybe it won't be too long, even with Niels Lundqvist coming into the mix. If Tony Deangelo, you'd assume, is going to be with the Rangers for at least the next 2 years, unless he's dealt, they are weighing the option of putting him on the left side. And from all the reports that I've seen from himself, from Vince McCurley interviewing him recently, he has said that he has no problem moving to the left side. So while they probably won't be here long term in Deangelo's case, nonetheless, this Rangers team now, they have so much depth, as we've touched on, not just defensively, but with their overall roster, with so many prospects blossoming up currently, and so many on the way that aren't on the same level of what Rangers prospects were known for being, say, 5 to 10 years ago. When it came to the best prospects for the Rangers, let's take Pavel Buchnevich, for example, when he really blossomed on the scene. I was really ecstatic. I still love Pavel Buchnevich, but he was like far and away the best thing to happen for the Rangers in the prospect pool. And when we have this kind of player that really stands out from the rest, you have such high expectations of him, when in reality, Buchnevich will probably stick with being a top 6 or top 9 winner, averaging in that 40, maybe 50 plus point range. But, you know, a very solid player in the NHL, no doubting. But with the type of prospects that the Rangers have now, it's just on a complete another level. Even take Kakko and Lafreniere out of that mix. You can even mention Chytil as possibly really blossoming into a top 6 centerman in the future or a winner. But their defensive prospects and Vitaly Kravtsov really stand out as guys that just won't have an impact to be on the roster, but have an impact, a significant one, to help this Rangers team in playoff runs and having great regular seasons over these next 5+ years.
Yeah, and the Rangers just went with the best player available in some cases, which is great to see. And in my opinion, the team always goes with who they think the best player is, regardless of position. And the Rangers trading up to get Braden Schneider, I know the front office was really excited about it. Even if he never makes the team, you still have a defenseman with top 4 potential who, if you don't have a spot for him, you trade him for a player in a different position.
Exactly. The Rangers have a lot of prospects with high trade stock currently, if the opportunity should present itself.
And the Nashville Predators a few years ago, they still drafted Seth Jones, even though they had later down the line Roman Josi, Matthias Ekholm, Ryan Ellis, and Shea Weber on defense. Yeah, and they ended up trading Seth Jones for Ryan Johansson. Now, in hindsight, you can say that trade worked out better for Columbus than it did for Nashville, but on the day of the trade, it was probably the perfect hockey trade. It was a 1-for-1 trade, two different positions, a win-win. Each team dealt from a position of strength to address a weakness.
And short term,
And
you could even make the same argument for even Weber and Subban because of how Subban directly affected Nashville's blue line when he first came in. He helped them get to their playoff run and getting the Stanley Cup. Yes, Weber's a better defenseman between the two, in my eyes, no doubting. And yes, Subban has fallen off a little bit of a cliff this past year or two. But nonetheless, on the forefront, when that deal happened, a lot of people thought that it was a very balanced trade, and I stood behind that for at least the first couple years.
yeah, and the Rangers have been involved in a similar trade when they traded Derek Brassard for Mika Zibanejad. It was a good trade for Ottawa at the time. They were in the prime of their window. They needed a guy who performed in the playoffs, and Derek Brassard in 2016 is probably a guy you target, even though he was 28 at the time. Because Derek Brassard in that cup run the following year, they were one goal away from making the Stanley Cup final in 2017 against the Penguins in the conference final. And Zibanejad was not going to do that for them in the playoffs.
Exactly.
Now 4 years later, of course, Zibanejad's the better player. There's no denying that. But short term, the Senators were definitely the winner of that trade.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I remember that trade like it was yesterday. And this is not to dwell on the past stuff regarding the Rangers because we're talking about the future, but let's talk about how they got there at the same time. You know, how did they really form this roster, not just for now, but going forward? But when this trade happened, I remember like it was yesterday. I was at my grandparents', I was swimming, and I went to check my phone, and I saw that the trade happened, and I was really struck hard. Obviously, we weren't expecting this to happen with a Rangers team that wasn't in a full direction of, say, a rebuild at that point by any means. So when that happened, I was upset to see Brassard go because Brassard easily became a fan favorite for the Rangers from as soon as he stepped on the ice, having his first goal. I believe it was against the Pittsburgh Penguins.
No. The day he was traded to the Rangers, he had a goal and 3 assists.
Yeah, and that was against the Pens, was it not?
Yeah.
And I remember because I believe they also traded for Ryan Clough that same day. Dorsett, John Moore,
and they all had points in that game.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I was upset to see Brassard go, but I knew who Mika Zibanejad was. I watched him in juniors, how he performed with Sweden. I knew that there was a lot of potential with him. And the Rangers' biggest issue, what they've had for quite some time, is not having a number one center. That really was their fault in a lot of their playoff runs over this past decade too, because don't get me wrong, we all love Derek Stepan, but he's not a number one center. Even in the prime of his career, he's not to the lengths of what Mika Zibanejad is and has been for a couple years now. So Mika really coming into his own. Yes, he has been dealing with his injuries when he, broke his leg first came over. All that stuff. We all know that story now. But nonetheless, that has paid off in dividends for the Rangers, and that is really what sparked everything for things to fare better in management's favor when it comes to making these trades for these younger players and how much this franchise and the roster has changed. It's just, It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy when you look at where the Rangers are now versus where they were just in the offseason in 2017.
Yeah, and Zibanejad and Buchnevich both played their first game for the Rangers in 2016. After Chris Kreider, they are the longest serving Rangers on the team, and that was 4 years ago.
I know.
Just think about that for a second. There's one player who played his first game 8 years ago, and then everyone else is 4 years or shorter on the team. But if I have to compare this Rangers team to if I have to make a favorable comparison here, it is the 2007 Chicago Blackhawks. And there's a lot of similarities that I'll quickly go over. They had 2 top 3 picks back to back. The Blackhawks had Taves in 2006, 3rd overall, and then Kane 1st overall in 2007. They have a really good puck-moving defenseman. We have Adam Fox. They had Duncan Keith. They signed their big free agent in Marian Hossa. We signed Artemi Panarin. They had their big draft bust in the top 10 in Ken Barker, and we had Elias Andersson. So there are a lot of similarities. And this is by no means a guarantee that the Rangers will win the Cup. But what I want to try and say here is that Ranger fans need to be a little bit patient here. The Rangers are not going to win the Cup this year or next year or this season or next season. it might be 3-4 years down the line before the Rangers actually win. And the same was true for the Penguins. When they drafted Crosby in 2005, they still needed 4 years before they saw their team lift the cup in 09.
Oh yeah, they weren't fantastic from the get-go.
Yeah,
These things take time.
exactly. In the LA Kings, they drafted Drew Doughty second overall in 2008. They also needed 4 years to lift the cup
That's
for the
true. They
first
won their
time.
first cup in 2012.
Yeah, so the Blackhawks are, I guess, the more optimistic comparison here, but there's a lot of similarities here to make that comparison. Of course, there are a lot of differences. We don't have Antiniemi in it. We have Igor Shesterkin, which is a huge difference. But I think the way this team is built, we don't really have an elite second line center, but neither did the Blackhawks. I think their second line center at the time was was it Hanzus? Michael.
I know that they traded for Hanzus. I don't believe it was them though. I think Hanzus was in one of their different cup runs.
Because in 2013 they traded for Antoine Vermette at the deadline.
Yeah, and he did really well for them.
Yeah, or was it 2015? In one of those cup runs, they traded for Antoine Vermette. They won a cup, and then he went back to Arizona, signed for the exact same money with Arizona as his previous contract.
Yeah.
And the Coyotes got a first round pick out of it, so it was a win-win for everyone. But yeah, the Rangers are still a couple of years away, which is fine. The Rangers have a good pipeline with good defensemen. On the left, we have guys like Robertson, Miller, Jones, Reunanen, and we never know what else is going to come up. Maybe they make a trade here or there. Maybe they trade from a position of strength to address a weakness. Maybe they trade Deangelo for a second line center and then trade Ryan Strome in a different deal for something else.
Yeah, exactly. They have endless possibilities, and that's why at the time of recording this, who's not to say that a lot happens still before the offseason ends. It very well could be the case. I think Ryan Strome is really the biggest coin flip as to 50-50 what happens there with him. But when we look at the Rangers right now, you look at how they did over this past season. They really hit strides, especially in that second half. I think, in my personal opinion, if the season was never cut short by the remainder of 12 games, I think the Rangers really would have cracked that wild card spot, given the pace that they were on. It wouldn't have been easy, but they were really in direction to make there. And nonetheless, just seeing how much progress this Rangers team had over this past year, while really being in such a development stage, with Igor Shesterkin gained his first games with the NHL, having a great start in those 12 regular season games, besides, of course, getting the accident with Buchnevich. Georgiev really making strides for the Rangers, really proving that he is without a doubt a 1B goaltender in the AHL and really could be a starter on multiple teams that lack goaltending depth. And then if you look at the Rangers from other aspects of this lineup, just how well that they gelled with so much youth on this roster, again, was the youngest team in the AHL for the portion of the year outside the Blackhawks. And now they're going into next year with a very similar lineup, having these same pieces that are developing. Adam Fox, look at what he did on just his rookie year. I find it hard to believe that he will not be mentioned in Norris voting in the near future for just how well balanced of a player he is. If he can take that next step, possibly get more point production, because we all know when it comes to NHL awards, you need the points. Doesn't matter how good you are defensively. You need to be at least 50 plus points for the most part. But then when you get on to other guys in this lineup too, Kakko, we haven't seen anything really with Kakko yet. For the people that are, say, worried about him having a bad rookie year, or Chytil taking his time to develop, these guys are so young. I can't stress that enough. Kakko, he's not even 21. Chytil, I believe he just turned 21. He's between 21 and 22. They're so young. And now you bring Alexis Lafreniere in this mix, and the Rangers weren't expecting that to happen. I think we can all agree that the Rangers were easily one of the teams with the brightest futures before you bring Alexis Lafreniere in this draft in the mix. Now you throw that in there, and you just have a recipe for success in my mind. So it's needless to say that the Rangers, how they really stack up with some other teams that I will touch on in this series, what can really be the difference maker for them is how much talent they already have on this roster and how much talent they still have yet to touch the roster. And really, so many of these guys have yet to hit their prime. So, granted, does that mean that all these guys are going to hit their prime and really reach expectations? No. But because of how deep the Rangers are when it comes to their prospect pool, they're willing to be able to handle if, say, one or two guys fall out, or they're dealt for, say, addressing a need, whatever it may be. The Rangers have more flexibility than they've really ever had, in my mind at least, and that should leave all Rangers fans excited, knowing that over these next 5 years, they surely should be not just a playoff contender, but as we get closer towards the end of this 5-year gap, really a Stanley Cup contender. They might do it sooner, they might do it later, who knows, but I think we can all agree that the future is definitely bright.
Yeah, and the final thing I'll say about this is not every team that rebuilds wins a cup, but every team that wins a cup has done a proper rebuild.
Yeah, no, I think I can agree with that, because another thing with the Rangers, even if you look at, say, the Pens, for instance, and as frustrated as us Ranger fans could be with, the Pens having such a great history, if you will, over this past couple decades, they had to go through a lot in order to get there. The Pens were not a good team for quite some time, and leading up to gain those multiple, whether it be first overall picks or top 5 picks during that span. A lot of these teams really went through a grind in a tough period of 5 to even a decade plus, and still haven't gone out of that hole to really reach where they want to be when it comes to developing players and having great talent already on the roster. The Rangers have managed to do this in not even full 4 years. So that's really another thing to consider. That's how impressive it's been between their luck and just making the right choices at the end of the day. I don't think that they've done everything near perfect, but they've made a lot of very smart moves to better this roster, not just now, but going forward.
Yeah, and over the last 10 years in the Metro Division, and before that the Atlantic Division, when the Atlantic Division was still 5 teams, you always saw the same teams at the top. It was Capitals, Penguins, Rangers, and it was always those 3. Of course, the Flyers made the Cup final in 2010, but now it's a completely new era. Now you have teams like Carolina, Columbus, coming up in the East. Who knows? Maybe Buffalo, if their prospects really pan out, maybe they can make a run. The teams in the new Atlantic Division, like Tampa Bay and Boston, they're getting older, so they might not be able to keep this up. We might see a change of the guards, especially in the East. And the Rangers, after just a short break because of a quick retool or rebuild or however you want to call it, might be back up there with those new teams. So the Rangers might be the only team to be contenders in the early 2010s and the early 2020s in the East, which is
That's a fun thought. I didn't even think about that for a second.
So the Rangers had a really quick turnaround, and yeah, we can just hope for the best. But this is a very exciting time for Ranger fans, and I'm happy that Gordon was given the time and the patience and the opportunity to do what he wanted to do. Because at the end of the day, he is the guy who masterminded the team in Boston that won the Cup in 2011.
Yes, he did. And I think that blows over a lot of people's heads as well. When Gordon came into the reins for the Rangers, he already had an established resume. He was a coveted guy as well. I think Gordon would be doing fantastic for really any team that would have landed him, should it not be the Rangers. So to see how he's handled under the pressure of being in a city like New York, this is not like, say, if you're in Arizona, not a shot at Arizona, but there's a clear difference when it comes to the pressure and the type of fan reaction and impact that they have on what the organization does. Outside of NBA, because the Knicks are a different story, but the Rangers have really been doing things right these past 4 years, and I commend them greatly for everything that they're doing, because they're in such a great spot, and I just really cannot stress that enough. Because let's take there's a lot of other teams, and I won't talk about them because I'm going to be discussing them in other videos, but we know a lot of other teams that are, say, on the up and coming in the NHL. And I think you look now at so many teams that are really looking at what the Rangers playbook has been since they started this rebuild, as to how were they able to manage to do it in such a quick time. I really think there are a lot of teams that are taking note of Gordon's decisions and just the direction that they have gone in such a short period of time, because it is not a common thing that has happened in the NHL.
Yeah. And this year's draft was sort of a change of pace when it comes to the type of players they targeted.
Definitely looking for more size.
They went with a different type of player. Of course, over the last few years, they got a lot of technical players like Lundqvist, Miller, Kravtsov, Pajuniemi. And they added Adam Fox in a trade, of course, and Panarin in free agency. And this year, when they go after Braden Schneider, Will Cooley, Brett Berard, you can tell that they had a different mindset. Of course, Lafreniere first overall brings that edge to the game as well, but that was a given. That was there was no decision to be made at first overall. But yeah, I still cannot believe the Rangers won a draft lottery. And like
I can't believe it. I'm not going to believe it until Lafreniere plays a game.
He has to play a game. He picked his number now, number 13.
Which looks so good on him.
I like number 13. It's a number that doesn't have a lot of history in New York. Of course, when Kakko went with 24, it was sort of a given, even though he used a lot of other numbers over the years.
It could be the start of something fun in New York when you just look at that Islanders rivalry. Because assuming that Barzal stays with the Islanders long term, we don't know what's going to happen there yet. Lou Lamoriello has a lot on his plate. That's a discussion for another day. But nonetheless, assuming Barzal's there long term, he's the face of that Islanders franchise currently, and for good reason. He's going to continue to get better in my eyes. Now you have him, and now you have Lafreniere, who Lafreniere is coming in. And no offense to Kakko, no offense to Shesterkin, but I think there's good reason to believe that Lafreniere is going to help lead the Rangers ahead, to really be their main guy, even with Panarin in the mix. I don't think it's going to take Lafreniere too long to reach where he wants to be. So you have him and Barzal at number 13. I just think that's pretty cool, as they are the two faces for each franchise.
Yeah, and the Rangers over the last few years, every time have added a player to their organization that took the pressure off their biggest prospect. In 2018, the Rangers drafted Kravtsov. That took a little bit of the pressure off of Chytil. 2019, they drafted Kaapo, took a little bit of the pressure off of Kravtsov. Now they add Lafreniere first overall, and it takes a little bit of the pressure off of Kakko.
And I think that does them so well because of the reason that, unlike these other prospects, for say, whether it's Chytil or Kravtsov or even Kakko, where they may struggle a little bit with finding their identity at the NHL level or their confidence for multiple different reasons. But you bring Lafreniere in the mix, who, from all that we've seen, from all that he said himself, the confidence is always there. You know, he's that really next level player when it comes to his mentality, it would suggest. So to have him basically be the stopping point is just the absolute perfect timing for the Rangers and their younger prospects that are developing, have yet to come in the lineup, or are currently there in both Chytil and Kakko. I think it's going to bode them well tremendously.
And keep an eye out on that Calder Trophy next year, because we have Shesterkin and Lafreniere in the mix there.
I will touch on the Calder another video, because they're like, I don't even know how to put into words how insane next year's Calder race may very well be.
Oh, Kaprizov in Minnesota is definitely in the running as well.
It's just nuts, because while goaltenders normally don't get a lot of consideration, you have Shesterkin obviously, but you also have Sorokin for the Islanders.
Sorokin with the Islanders,
like, that's nuts. And I'm pretty sure Samsonov played enough games this past year to be, I think he's ineligible to be in the race. But outside of him, there are a lot of great young goaltending talent coming into the NHL. And you just have so many guys that really were, say, higher picks a couple years ago that are finally coming into being NHL regulars now. That, say, have had a cup of coffee here and there each season, but haven't reached the point of being cut off for the Calder race. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm curious to see how many players out of this 2020 NHL draft class, for instance, are going to actually make the NHL Game 1. So, yeah, I'm ecstatic. I can't wait for that Calder race. I don't know what else to say about that. That's awesome. But yeah, no, I think we hit everything nail on the head in this video. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on with the Rangers before I let you go?
Let me think. No, I think we touched on everything, to be honest. We went over the draft, went over the prospects, the future, Canada at the World Juniors. I mean, it's what a time to be alive as a Ranger fan, right? And aside from winning the Stanley Cup, this is the most exciting time to be a Ranger fan.
I completely agree, and I gotta hold on 1 second. You don't see it obviously, but I've shown you this before, And I'm just showing the Alexis Lafreniere newspaper again because I've yet to frame it. But I have one on the wall behind me, guys. I'm gonna frame this one real soon. But yeah, no, it just, again, I don't think I think most Ranger fans can agree that it really hasn't hit us yet as to just how bright this future is. And it's fun to gas up these prospects and you say maybe go above lengths of what they're really going to do at the NHL level, but things are just different. They're just different. This is something, again, that the Ranger fans, myself included, have never really experienced before. So it's really hard to grasp an idea of what can we expect? What should we expect? But it's all fun at the end of the day, and I can't wait for these memories to be made. We made plenty over this past day, at least for me. I know that there are older Ranger fans watching this than me, but for me personally, this past decade has been tremendous. You know, this is all the start of me becoming a hockey and a Rangers fan. Between the Rangers, the first playoff run, I really followed them intensely, led to them being losing in that Eastern Conference Finals to Adam Henrique in overtime to the Devils. That was my first real Rangers memory that I have to date. And ever since then, we've all seen those playoff runs, and oh my God, were they so much fun. I couldn't even watch the overtime when Stepan scored the OT winner. When it hit OT, I was literally I was shaking. I couldn't. I was like, I don't even remember how old I was, but I was very young. And through all those memories, through all those great memories, I'm grateful for all the moments and for all the Rangers that have been on this roster that have really made what a Ranger fan is and how much fun it's been. But now that wave is gone. It was great, but all good things come to an end, and now a great one is starting, and it's surely going to be one that we have never seen before. So again, I can't wait, and I can't thank you enough, Steven, again, for coming on the channel. It means a lot. I thought it would be perfect to start out the series, not just with my favorite team, but with my favorite guy and Steven over here. So thank you again, buddy. It means a lot. If you want to put your tags, of course, for your podcast and your Twitter, by all means, go for it. And yeah, thank you all again so much for watching, guys. It means a ton.
Yeah, my Twitter is statboy_Steven. I basically just write about European prospects. I talk to them regularly. I do interviews with them as well. So follow me, and you see the interviews pop up. I interviewed Zach Jones and Tarmo Reunanen in the last few weeks. I have one coming up with Adam Edstrom, who served a 5-game suspension in Sweden, and also Evan Vierling, Brett Berard, and Will Cooley coming up. So.
Oh, awesome! See, I didn't even know that you got in touch with them already. That's awesome.
Oh, that should have been a surprise. Never mind. It's out there now. But yeah, I spoke to all 3 of them. I have to transcribe the video quickly, of course, and then write it down. But yeah, the interview with Brett Berard was definitely a lot of fun. He was at the summer showcase or at the development camp with the under-20 United States team, while as we were doing the interview. So. There were guys like in the background just checking in on him, and I said hi to Hunter Skinner quickly because he was there as well, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's absolutely awesome. Yeah, no, I can't wait to check them out. Make sure you guys check them out too for all of the Ranger fans watching this. Thank you again so much, Steven. It means a ton, and I will definitely be talking to you soon.
All right, have a good day.
All right, guys, thank you again so much for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. As always, if you enjoy this kind of hockey content, and stay tuned. That is just episode 1 of the multiple episodes we'll have in this series covering all the NHL teams for the most part that have the brightest future in the NHL. Who's the next team going to be? You'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure when I'll have that video up yet, but they will definitely be coming up real soon, along with all the other different kinds of content I'll be having for you on the channel. So make sure to wait and check them out. As always, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Rangers fans, how hyped are you for this Rangers future? What are your thoughts overall as to what this future is going to hold for them? Not just next season, but the years going forward. We're talking 5+ years. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. As always, guys, and again, I did start a contest. If you know graphic design and you would possibly like to make a logo for this channel, make sure to check it out and email me. I'll have my email in the description down below, and whoever wins, whoever's logo I pick to basically be my new logo on the channel, I will be sending them a $25 Visa gift card. So again, there is some incentive there, guys, but make sure to check it out in the description if you're interested. Thank you all again, guys. It means a ton, and I'll be back real soon.